breaking news. Moments ago, our NBC News reporters and producers in Ukraine reported hearing blasts in the region, a possible sign of conflict from Russian forces spread along the border there. This as the UN Security Council held an emergency late-night meeting during which officials implored Vladimir Putin to stop any hostile action towards Ukraine. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, calling this a perilous moment, asking Russia's president to order tanks and planes and troops to back away from Ukraine's borders. A full-scale invasion could lead to one of the biggest conflicts we've seen in Europe in decades. U.S. intel warns that as many as 50,000 civilians could be killed or injured. President Biden has warned of a decisive response with swift and severe economic costs. So we are watching what's happening in Kiev at this moment right now. You can see there's still a little bit of traffic there. It is roughly 5:29 a.m. in Kiev. Again, our reporters and producers there in the capital city hearing what they think are explosions. Vladimir Putin taking to state TV tonight, the morning over there in Russia, announcing that U.S. imperialism, as he called it, is trying to spread its power and that NATO is threatening Russia, that they no longer have any more opportunity. I'm understanding we have our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who's been in contact with his sources and the White House with some of the messaging and some of the statements from President Biden tonight. Peter, what can you tell us from the White House, and what is their understanding of what's happening in Ukraine at this hour?
Well, Tom, I can tell you I've been inside the White House, and some of the president's top advisors I've already seen tonight. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, his chief of staff, and others who have been gathering and huddling over the course of the last several hours. And within the last 2 minutes, we have now received our first statement from the President of the United States. And since we just got it, I'll read some of the key portions of it. He says the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer what he calls an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. The president says that President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone, he says, is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. He writes, the world will hold Russia accountable. The president says in a statement, again, just released by the White House within the last 2 minutes, that he's going to be monitoring the situation from the White House this evening. We'll continue to get regular updates from his national security team. Again, I ran into his national security advisor here in the White House within the last hour or so as he and others were huddling together based on the information that they are learning about what's happening on the ground in Ukraine right now. The president, as was previously scheduled, is announcing that he will be meeting tomorrow morning in a secure virtual call with the leaders of the G7, including the leaders of France, the leaders of the UK and Germany as well. And then he will be delivering a statement later in the day. So we will look forward to hearing the president, not tonight, but tomorrow when he comes before the cameras and the world, after having a chance to gather together and consult some of America's allies. Tom, late tonight, we also saw an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council where one of the individuals the president has been consulting with, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, told those gathered there that a full-scale invasion of Ukraine is imminent. She says there is no middle ground. Russia is the aggressor. Again, those are some of the details we're just learning from here at the White House. The president monitoring the situation overseas right now, as you've been reporting, as we've been seeing the first sounds of blasts taking place in Kyiv and other reports of other similar blasts happening elsewhere in that country.
And Peter, as possibly the first rounds in this war are fired, there's also a war of words happening between Vladimir Putin and President Biden. Vladimir Putin taking to state TV just a short time ago. Among the things he said, the spin he's saying really, and sort of changing the narrative here, saying the U.S. does not want to negotiate with Russia. And Peter, we know because we've been talking about this for weeks now, the U.S. has tried time and time again, along with the French, along with the Germans, to try to reach some kind of diplomatic consensus here to prevent this war from happening. Even this week, our Secretary of State was set to meet with the foreign minister of Russia, and President Biden said he was open in principle to meeting with Vladimir Putin. But now it seems like that diplomatic window has been shut.
Well, it's pretty clear that that window, if not locked shut for now, is shut for the near future. The U.S. and the president has said that diplomacy remains an option if President Putin is looking for an off-ramp. It was literally tomorrow, or I guess it's still tomorrow, Thursday, where Secretary of State Tony Blinken was scheduled to meet with his counterpart from Russia, Sergei Lavrov. They said that it didn't make sense to go ahead with that meeting. That meant as well that the president's meeting with Vladimir Putin that they had agreed to in principle wouldn't be happening as well. The president, as you know, laid out that first tranche of sanctions that hit a pair of state-owned banks, sanctions on Russian debt, meaning they could no longer raise money in the U.S. or from the U.S. and from Europe, and also on some Russian oligarchs. As it relates to those banks, as it was described to us by one senior official here, those were effectively the piggy banks for Vladimir Putin's, some of his closest friends, for Russia itself. And the president, most importantly, said that if Russia continued to escalate, the U.S. would further escalate these sanctions at the time. So we wait to see what that next step will look like at this moment. But again, recognize what we're witnessing right here, Tom. This is something that the U.S. has been warning about in what was an unprecedented fashion. They've been detailing exactly what they thought would happen, these pretexts, these sort of false, these lies to sort of give them the pretext to initiate this invasion would precede an actual attack, and that's exactly what we continue to be witnessing at this time. Again, the president monitoring the situation. I keep checking my phone for any other details as we're speaking to sources here about the circumstances, but this appears to be the opening salvos in what the White House fears could be a much larger war there. Yeah,
and it seems, at least for right now, this is not the shock and awe maybe some people were expecting, at least at this moment. Again, we want to couch all our reporting here. Our reporters and producers in Kyiv had heard some explosions. We are still awaiting confirmation on all of that. As you know, this is a very fluid situation, what's happening in Ukraine.